Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about addictions and how you can break yourself free from addictions just by knowing what's going on at the neurochemical level in your brain. And then once you understand that, you can take the correct actions forward to get out of that addiction. So here's the natural cycle about what goes on when you become addicted to a certain substance. So what happens is you have a normal level of pleasure where you are healthy, happy, and your pleasure centers are intact and in really good form. And this is how you would feel in a natural world without any stimulations from anything. Okay? So what happens is, let's just say you start drinking alcohol and you drink for 30 days. So you become dependent on the drug, and what happens is you go from this natural level of pleasure and you get a hyper response and jump up into an enhanced chemical level in the brain, and this in turn makes you become dependent on the drug if you do it for long enough. So you're drinking booze and you're feeling really good and you're nice and high. And what ends up happening if you continue to drink over time, what ends up happening is you build a tolerance level to the drug that you're using or the alcohol. So your new level of baseline has increased, so it's gone up. It's not down here at the natural level anymore. It's increased upward. And now this is where you feel normal. And this is where dependence happens, and you need the drug to feel any amount of normal in your daily life. So what happens after 30 days when you decide you want to quit drinking booze? What ends up happening is, because your new tolerance level is higher than your natural level of pleasure, you not only go down to baseline again, you actually dive down under baseline and you go into this subnormal category of pleasure where you feel anxious, depressed, irritable, and your overall quality of life just sucks and you just feel like nothing's exciting in life. People think they get trapped down here in this subnormal level of pleasure, but this isn't actually where they get trapped. They get trapped up here in the dependency issue, where their dependency to feel good has risen from a natural level of pleasure. So what does it take to get out of this subnormal level of pleasure where you actually just feel absolutely disgusting? The only thing you can really do is make sure you're depriving yourself of the substance for a certain level of time so your brain can readapt back to a normal level of pleasure. And that's where you come out of the addiction, right here in the fifth stage. So let's just go over it one more time real quick. So you got a normal level of pleasure, you start drinking booze, you get a hyper response, you keep drinking the booze. So what ends up happening is your normal level of pleasure becomes heightened, and now you have a dependency issue right in the middle right here. And to get off, you need to deprive yourself of the substance, and when you go down, you're going to have a subnormal level of pleasure, and it's gonna be time dependent depending on how long you've been addicted to the drug for or the alcohol, and then you're going to come out the other side and you're going to come back to a natural level of pleasure. Dopamine is a pleasure chemical inside your brain, and it tells you when you've done something good. Okay, you get pleasure from doing something good, eating a big gourmet meal, taking drugs and alcohol, because drugs and alcohol give you a hyperstimulation and you feel great at the beginning. Like everything feels really good, and then you come off and you feel like trash. Pornography and gambling are two other major players in the addiction cycle too. There's a lot of people that are addicted to pornography and gambling, and they can't get out of it because they're stuck in this dependency issue from hyper stimulation. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how natural food affects you when compared to highly processed food when it comes to the pleasure centers and the pleasure chemicals in your brain. So let's just say you're eating a natural diet of whole foods. You have this baseline level of pleasure, and when you eat a meal that is based on whole foods, you get this little bump in pleasure, and then you come back down to baseline. Okay, that would be let's just say breakfast, and then for lunch you'd have another whole foods meal and you get another pleasure response, and then you come back down to baseline. And then for dinner it'd be the exact same thing. You get a heightened response, just a little bump, and then you come back down to baseline. And you're feeling really good during this time. You're really healthy and you're feeling really good. You don't have any overstimulation going on, so you're not becoming dependent and addicted on the substance. Okay, so now let's say you change your diet and you start eating highly processed crap. So this is your baseline level of pleasure. And then you wake up and you have your first meal, your first breakfast meal, and you eat, let's just say, candy, okay? And you get this hyper response. And you feel, at the time, you feel unbelievable. You're feeling really upbeat, really energized, you know, kind of like an Energizer buddy. You feel really, really, really good. So you finish your breakfast, and then during the next 3-4 hour period, you drop back down and you go a little bit under baseline, okay? So you're not really feeling all that great. You're kind of feeling irritable. Maybe you feel a little bit depressed, a little anxious. Who knows? Might be any of those things. So lunch comes around and you get another hyper response because you had chocolate for lunch. So you get this hyper response and you're up in this enhanced zone again, and then you plummet back down between lunch and dinner into this subcategory where you might feel a little bit more anxious, a little bit more depressed, and a little bit more irritable than you did between breakfast and lunch. Okay? And what happens over time, you keep doing this cycle with the hyperpalatable foods, and then at the end, you have this subnormal level of pleasure that has become dependent, and you sit there, and the only way to get back to a normal state of pleasure and happiness is to sit in this subnormal category and deprive yourself of the substance for a certain level of time to come out the other end, and then you'll be recovered. This addiction cycle is very important for people with depression. People with depression often have a tough time figuring out why they're feeling the way they're feeling. Why are they so down? Why is life not exciting? They sit there, they get crazy thoughts. I know people that get crazy thoughts from being depressed, and they just don't understand what's going on. And chances are they're taking a stimulant or they're eating something that's hyperpalatable and they continue to eat it, and they're having this addiction response go on where they become dependent on whatever substance it is that they're using. And then when they go off for a period of time, they dive down into this zone, the sub-pleasure zone, and they feel like absolute shit. So how do people with depression fix this? They get off the hyperpalatable foods, they get off the stimulants, and they get off the drugs and the alcohol. It's the only way to do it. You got to deprive yourself and go through the period, which may last 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 weeks. Who knows? It might last 3 months. But if you get off those substances, then you're going to come back and you're going to come out the other end and you're going to feel absolutely amazing, and life is going to be enjoyable and you're going to be super happy again. Addiction is a very serious thing. I've seen lots of people just go through massive destruction in their lives because they just can't figure out why they're in the state that they are. And it's because of this addiction cycle that's going on in their brain. And they continue to relapse and recover, relapse and recover, relapse and recover. If you have depression, the chances are that you are eating or drinking or taking in some type of substance that is giving you a hyper response, and you're becoming dependent on that substance over time, and then you're diving down into the pits and you're struggling to get out of it. You have to get rid of the stimulants, the drugs, and the substances that are giving you that hyper response in your brain, okay? Because you can't argue with your neurochemistry. It is what it is. If you're going to start drinking coffee and you're going to have 3 cups a day, you're going to become dependent on that substance, okay? And people like to think that coffee isn't a problem, but coffee is a huge problem in our society, and it makes people feel like shit. That's why people that get up in the morning feel like crap without having their first cup of coffee. So I have a lot of people that I know that have gone through rehab, and they've come out of rehab and they've still continued to struggle with their alcohol addiction because they're addicted to other substances as well. Like, they don't realize that cigarettes, coffee, hyperpalatable foods, those 3 things in particular, because those are the things that people will continue to do outside of rehab after they've done recuperating from booze and drugs and alcohol. But those 3 substances, hyperpalatable foods, coffee, cigarettes, all go through this same mechanism, and you can become just as depressed from them as you do from all the other strong drugs and alcohol. Although drugs and alcohol are obviously in a different category. They do give you even more of a response than these do, than cigarettes and food and stuff like that. But you still get a response out of this, okay? So here are some tips that you can use if you're trying to get out of depression and you're trying to come out and you're trying to get that balance in that pleasure zone back to baseline where you feel good, happy, and your day-to-day life is really, really enjoyable. First thing, start eating whole natural foods. Best way to go. You're not going to get that hyper response from natural foods because they're not highly processed. 2, get off the coffee and the cigarettes, okay? Stop giving yourself that hyper response that you feel from smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. If you do that, you'll recover down to a baseline of pleasure where your level of happiness from day to day will be absolutely phenomenal and you'll feel really good. You just have to understand that breaking free from this is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Like changing to a whole foods diet when you've been consuming hyper palatable foods for your whole life is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Quitting cigarettes is extremely hard to do. Quitting coffee is extremely hard to do. You're going to go through some serious withdrawals. I am actually going through my withdrawal right now from coffee because I got on it in the last quarter of the year last year, and I feel absolutely like shit. Terrible. My mind is all over the place. I got bad thoughts, and I just started cutting again. So I'm going to start getting into that depressive zone because I'm not going to be eating enough carbohydrates, but that's what I have to do to get lean, which is super shitty. I still eat carbs throughout the day, but it's just not enough to feed my brain at an optimal level. And I know when I am done my dieting and I up my carbohydrate intake, I instantly get out of depression because my muscles and my liver are saturated with carbohydrates and my body isn't searching for energy because the energy is right there. The carbohydrates are right there and it can break it down like that and you feel so good. Tomorrow I'm going to be talking about how low carbohydrates are directly related to depression and what you can do to combat that issue, because I see too many people not eating enough carbohydrates, actually buying into a high-fat ketogenic diet, and that is just not the way to go. So that's it for today, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you liked it, hit the subscribe button down below and we'll talk to you later.